there. But do make sure you head over to the workshop, sign up for the workshop, because this is going to be a really fun time. I will go in depth. I have a mini health questionnaire that I send to all the attendees coming, so that I can really shape the content to suit you, your life, your needs, everything along those lines. So do join me. It's on Wednesday the 7th of March at 7:30. Should have said that. But let's get to the topic at hand. I've got my notes here in front of me. So we're going to look at dairy, and it's quite fashionable now, as you probably noticed, veganism's become really, really popular. And obviously veganism is a lifestyle that involves no animal products whatsoever. So obviously dairy isn't included in that. But just in things that you read, it's really easy to look at stuff and just get a bit confused about this whole idea of dairy. Should you eat it? Shouldn't you eat it? And then you might have in your head, well, what about calcium? And how do I get that? And actually, as women, it is really, really important that we make sure we are getting enough calcium in our diets and in our lives, because we need it for our bones and all that sort of good stuff. Hold on, I'm just going to try something here with Instagram. Apologies, Instagram, if that is confusing you. Just going to tilt this up. There we go. I think that might be better in the long run. So what we're going to look at first of all is dairy evil. Is dairy this like evil food that you shouldn't eat and is really, really bad? Well, number one, I don't think it is. I think dairy, when you look at the nutrient profile of dairy, then it's actually a really nutrient dense food. It's a food that has good fat soluble vitamins in. There's some good protein, there's some good healthy fats. It's in its natural kind of unprocessed form. It can actually be really, really beneficial. So, is it evil? No. And I don't really like giving that label to foods of, certain foods being good, certain foods being bad. This food is evil. This food is amazing. Actually food is just food. At the end of the day, food is food. That's it. But when it comes to dairy, it is a bit nuanced. Only the nutritional profile of dairy is good. It's a good source of nutrients, good source of calcium, good source of kind of your proteins, good source of vitamin A, fat soluble vitamins, that kind of thing. Really, really good for that. So what could be the benefits of dairy? Well, really those are things like from the minerals and vitamins that you get in it, as well as the macronutrients, things like fat and proteins. It could be really, really helpful. Also, dairy is quite readily available. It's not really difficult to get hold of. It's not like spirulina, although you can get spirulina at most supermarkets, but it's relatively accessible in order for people getting hold of it. So that definitely is a benefit of it. And for some people, if it is well tolerated and digested properly, then it can be a really good source of nutrients in the diet. So why does it get problematic then? Like, what happened with the whole dairy is super evil? Where has that come from? What does that even mean? And what we're going to look at is who could eat dairy and who maybe shouldn't eat dairy, who it's not necessarily going to be that beneficial for. So a lot of what in my opinion, is the problem with dairy is that dairy is now a really processed food. So the light's gone weird because it stopped snowing and the sun's come out, which is very exciting. So dairy, back in the day, we would have had a cow, or our friends next door would have had a cow. They would have milked said cow, and then we would have drank that milk. That's kind of the process. Or we might have churned it up to make butter, or we might have skimmed off the top to get cream, and then we might have put a little bit of bacteria in it and left it for a couple of weeks to make cheese. That is kind of how the process would have gone back in the day. Now, dairy is a really big industry. It is the dairy that we actually get is highly processed. So you get milk, it gets pasteurized, it gets homogenized, it gets filtered, it gets boiled up. Things like we get dairy made into things like margarine to get them made more spreadable. We have all of these things. We remove fat from milk, so we make it semi-skimmed, or we make it skimmed, or now I've even seen this like high protein milk, or skimmed milk that tastes like full fat milk. There's just a lot of processing in. So in my opinion, one of the biggest problems with dairy isn't that it's an evil food. It isn't that it's a food we should never eat and is just really, really awful for you. It's actually more about the processing and the fact that dairy these days is a processed food. Back in the day, in its natural whole form, it's not really a processed food. It just kind of came from like Daisy the cow, who was your cow or lived next door to you. Whereas now it is on supermarket shelves. We don't have cows anymore. I don't have a cow. Don't even have a goat. Don't even have chickens. I don't even have a goldfish. I have no animals in my house. And so how we get dairy is primarily processed. And that is what causes a lot of problems, in my opinion, when it comes to doing it. So when it comes down to should you eat dairy, shouldn't you eat dairy, who should eat dairy, all of that sort of stuff, I often talk of this a lot about with my clients, and I'm going to talk about this more in the workshop next week that I do, is that it really comes down to experimenting and figuring what works for your body. So for me, with dairy, I've had a lot of digestive issues. I used to have chronic diarrhea every day, really bad IBS, and lots of other random health problems that started from very young, probably like, very young child, like 7. So that by the time I was maybe 17, someone suggested to me, why don't you try removing dairy and see if that makes you feel better? Especially with things like diarrhea and bowel issues, it might be really helpful. So I just did an experiment. I literally just took dairy out for like a month just to see if I felt better. And for me, I actually did feel better. And so I continued on with that experiment, and over time, and probably overall, I was quite strictly dairy free for about 7 years, I think, overall. But that was because I experimented and it worked for my body. Now, for certain people, dairy, they might be able to tolerate dairy fine. But for the people that I tend to think really need to have a look at, that we should really maybe experiment with ditching dairy, are those that maybe have digestive issues, maybe toilet problems like bowel issues, diarrhea, bloating, IBS, skin issues potentially, those kinds of things. You really want to just run an experiment for 30 days and see if it makes you feel better, worse, or the same. That's it. Run an experiment. Just see what happens. You're not committing to a life, of dairy-free, and actually and that's the best place to start. So if I ever have any of my one-to-one clients in my nutrition practice, if they ever come to me with bloating, skin issues, bowel issues, wind, embarrassing, constipated diarrhea, they're bloated every day, they're really sinusy, so meaning they're always getting sinus infections and feeling really clogged up there, then dairy is always something I just say, hey, let's run an experiment on your body, because everyone's body is so different. And I can't tell you that from the amount of clients I work with. I can get 2 people come to me that present with similar histories and symptoms, and maybe I've got 2 people coming to me that have bowel issues, bloating, and it's been that way since a child. But I can guarantee that what works for both of those people will be totally different. So it's really important to just be gently curious about it. In terms of who shouldn't ditch dairy, I think people that are caught up in a very restrictive mindset around food, meaning it's very easy to think, if I just restrict more things, then I'll feel better. So if I just restrict dairy and then gluten and then grains and then nightshades and then sugar and then this and then this and then this and then this and this, and they end up actually with a really small handful of foods that they can eat, that's actually often really not helpful. And it's really more important to get to the root of the problem, the root of your health issues, and create a really healthy relationship with food. Obviously, as well for children, I'm not really too sure, unless there's an allergy, or it impacts behavioral children. And I know with diets like the GAPS diet and other things, I sometimes dairy can be helpful to remove for children, but in general, I think when you go for good quality dairy, which I'll talk about in a minute, having children shouldn't really have dairy removed from their diet. I don't think they need a lot of it. I don't think they need to depend on it, but I think it's probably something that's ideally not. You kind of want to avoid that situation. So when it comes to dairy, first of all, you need to run an experiment on yourself and see what works for you. There is no point in restricting dairy just for the sake of it. And that, I don't think you need dairy in order to survive. You can be perfectly healthy and not eat dairy. That's totally fine. But there's no point in restricting for restriction's sake. But then the second part is you need to run an experiment on yourself and then look at the different types of dairy. So I know for me and a lot of my clients that a lot of people will really not tolerate milk. So just plain milk in a latte or in tea, that can be really problematic for them. But actually butter and maybe mature cheese is fine. I've had other clients that really can't tolerate milk and yogurt, but they can tolerate butter and ghee completely fine. So in terms of the most kind of digestible and easy on the body dairy foods, they would be things like butter and ghee. So even if, like me, you feel like you are a bit sensitive to dairy, then you can, and especially things like milk, I would recommend removing milk especially. That's often problematic. Again, because modern milk is so heavily processed. It's very much a processed food. But often people will be able to tolerate butter and ghee, and that means you're still getting all these awesome nutrients. You're still getting those fat-soluble things, you're still getting some healthy saturated fats, you're getting some calcium in there, but you're just not upsetting your body and you're able to digest it properly. So butter and ghee are my most favorite dairy foods. Unless you have a true allergy, most people can digest either ghee or butter. So ghee is like clarified butter. Nearly everyone I know, unless there's an allergy, which is a different thing, excuse me, can tolerate butter or ghee, and they are amazing superfoods to have in your diet. So whether you feel like you don't do well with dairy or maybe you do well with dairy, everyone can eat more butter and can eat more ghee. Now, ideally, with all dairy that you eat, any dairy that you eat, you really want to go and invest in organic dairy. So you want to invest in organic milk, organic cheeses, organic yogurts, just organic all round, just because the dairy industry is horrendous. It's cruel, and they force loads of hormones and all sorts of stuff into your dairy. And organic, just going organic is a slightly better option. I'm not saying it's the best thing in terms of animal welfare, but it is better than going with the standard one. And it's also better for your body. It means you're getting better nutrients. If you really want to go the whole hog with dairy, and this is what I did when I used to consume milk regularly, especially after I'd had those 7 years of being off of it, is I used to go to a farm directly near where I lived in England, and I would buy milk directly from the farm, and it would be raw milk. So it was unhomogenized and unpasteurized. I would go in my little, I think I'd borrow a friend's car actually, because I didn't have a car. I'd borrow my friend's car probably once a month, once every 6 weeks. I'd stock up on raw milk. So raw organic milk. I bought it straight from the farm. I could say hey to the cows, check they're doing all right, check the facilities of the farm, chat to the animal owners, see if I liked their vibe and if they were respectful for the animals, and I could drink raw milk. And I found that I tolerated raw milk so much better than standard milk. And that was how I reintroduced dairy into my life. Now I live in Scotland, so raw milk is illegal. You can't buy it here. So I tend to just stick with eating butter and ghee, and sometimes I'll have organic cheese. That seems to be okay with my body. Whereas milk and cream, I tend to still avoid because I can't get that raw form, and I'm not really interested in anything else. So there is some people have issues with raw dairy because of the potential risks of listeria or other things in there. I've looked at some of the research and I think they're quite unfounded. Most of from as far as I'm aware, and I might be wrong, a lot of the cases that come up with these things, often the root of it isn't in unpasteurized dairy, it's often in processed foods. So that's my opinion, but you've got to make your own choice around raw dairy. And even if you just Google, if you're looking where to find raw dairy, if you just Google raw dairy UK or whatever country you're in, there's sites that are like directories where they show you your nearest farm, where you can buy it online, you can set up subscriptions, or like me, you can find your nearest farm and get in the car and make a trip of it with the family. I used to love going to the farm because I'd also get like raw butter, and it was in the countryside, and it was just really nice. So in terms of if you do want to eat dairy, then going for those organic I would say is a must. And then ideally raw forms, if you're comfortable and feel at ease with that, is the best sources of dairy. If you know dairy really doesn't suit me, I've already experimented, Kezia, it doesn't work, then it's really, really important that you get some healthy alternatives. So a lot of these milk alternatives are often filled with quite a lot of rubbish and crap in them. They often have lots of maltodextrins and carrageen gum and all of that sort of stuff. So always check the labels of your kind of dairy-free milks. And it's also really important that you get enough calcium in your diet. So one of the best sources of calcium that you can have, ideally on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, or does that mean twice a week? Anyway, ideally once or twice a week, is sardines. Super cheap. You can just buy a tin of sardines from the shop, mush it up. I grew up eating sardines, so I have my mum to thank for my enjoyment of them. Mush them up, put them on toast, put them on rice cakes. Honestly, if you mush them up properly, you have no idea what's going on there. But sardines with the bones in just tin sardines, they cost like 50p in olive oil, or maybe 70p. That's it. That is an amazing, amazing source of calcium. I can't remember what the ratio is, or how much exact calcium it has in it in terms of micrograms, but that is a really potent source. So making sure you're eating regular sardines, plus you've got protein in there, you've got omega fats, you've got all of these good stuff. So sardines are a great alternative to calcium. Other great calcium alternatives are things like, if you feel like you can tolerate ghee and butter, including those in. They're obviously not dairy free, but they're still coming with all that amazing calcium that's going to do you good without all of the potential other things that are difficult. But in terms of pure non-dairy things, almonds are a good source of calcium. So making your own almond butter, having almonds as a snack can be really, really helpful. And things like green leafy veg can be a really helpful source. So those are a couple of things just to make sure you keep putting into your week, of things like sardines, especially, your almonds, your green leafy veg. Just plugging those into your diet is really, really, really important. In terms of calcium supplementation, I don't tend to think it's a great idea to do that unless you've got test results that tell you exactly what's going on, because your calcium intake is dependent on other minerals like magnesium. And so you really don't want to supplement with just calcium willy-nilly. It's not a great idea. And a lot of the calcium supplements out there are terrible because they're just basically chalk. Literally, just literally chalk, which isn't helpful. And there's actually lots of other cofactors that are really important because calcium basically creates this structure in the bones, and there's lots of cofactors that go around helping calcium create this structure. So those are some of just there's more foods with calcium in, but those are my top 3. Sardines are the best in terms of calcium. Honestly, they taste better than you think. I know often people get put off by that. Just figure out a way you can eat them. They're so good for your health. Almonds, almond butter, and green leafy veg are some great places to start. And often some of these more natural milk alternatives will add calcium to it. Often it's the crap form of calcium that you don't absorb, but anyhow, it's better than nothing. So I hope that is helpful in terms of demystifying the world of dairy. Should you be dairy? Should you eat dairy? Is it dairy free? And it is a bit of a tension between the two of these things. Dairy can really irritate some people's health. It can cause an immune response. It can aggravate digestion, sinus health, all of that kind of thing. That is the case. But it's also a really nutrient-dense food. Dairy is full of nutrients, fat-soluble vitamins, and it can be really, really beneficial. So you've got to figure out your own body. You've got to work with someone like me, or just run some experiments to figure out what works for your body and what doesn't work for your body. So, and then figuring out that in between. Again, I would say from working with clients and people in my communities that a lot of people don't deal well with milk. It's just really processed unless you're, say, getting raw milk. So you've got 2 options. You can either remove milk, or you could try some raw milk. Often that's more digestible. But people might not tolerate milk, but they can often tolerate things like butter or ghee or even mature cheeses. So you're still getting all that nutrient, but you're not getting that digestive upset from the milk or milk is more processed than, say, cheese is, or more processed than, say, butter. So you're actually getting a less processed version. So if in doubt, listen to your body. Feel free to message me, leave comments, private message me, let me know any questions that you have. But it really is a case of listening to your body, not labeling foods as evil or terrible. And as with all foods that we eat, a lot of the time it comes down to quality. So with dairy, often it's about making sure you get really good quality foods. So it's organic, it's grass-fed, it's maybe raw. It's a really good quality food. Your cheap standard milk from the corner shop is probably filled with hormones and other toxins that your body just doesn't need or want, and your family doesn't need or want. So going for really good quality dairy, go for organic as a minimum if you're going to if you're going to eat dairy at all. But if you choose to not have dairy, really making sure you focus on getting calcium rich foods into your diet in the form of like tinned sardines, almonds, and leafy greens. So I hope that's been really helpful for you. This has been fun. This has been my first Facebook Live, Instagram Live, all at the same time. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know your comments below. And if you want more information about this, if you want more help in beating the bloat and ditching your sugar addiction and just figuring out what works for your body, figuring out how to run these experiments, how to feel good in the skin that you're in and overcome those sugar addictions and that bloating and that digestive discomfort, make sure you join me for my workshop, which is happening on the 7th of March, 7:30 UK time. And you can find the link in my profile or in the post above. So I hope that's been helpful. I come and I will be back here on Tuesday, every Tuesday, about 3 o'clock. I hop on for another Supernaturally Healthy Life. So I'll be here next week on a different topic. I was going to say a more exciting topic, but I actually find this topic pretty exciting. And I'll see you guys then. Be in touch. Message me if you have any questions. Otherwise, sending you lots and lots of love. Bye.